Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. I have the one, the only, the legendary R.A. Salvatore, Bob Salvatore with me right here. How you doing, mate?
Good. I thought I was only a legend in my own mind. That's awesome.
You're a legend at Forbidden Planet as well. You know, there we go. It's even better. How have you been, mate?
I've been great. It's busy, grandfather of 7 now. A
Amazing.
little different than when I started these books 35 years ago.
Yeah.
But, I'm just having fun and trying to live every day like it's worth living, and it is.
Yeah,
So,
right on. Well said, mate. And we were talking off camera about how it's an amazing 35 years since the Crystal Shard, which I'm struggling to believe. And I can see, you know, when I look at the wealth of your work that I've read over the years, I can see, oh, actually, that's right. You know what I mean? But it's just amazing, really, mate.
it stuns me that most of the people that come to these books, particularly the Dark Elf books, are younger than the books. That's I go to book signings now, and it's like a Fleetwood Mac concert. You know, you've got the grandfather with his son and his granddaughter, and they're all reading the book.
Oh yeah,
it's very cool. It's very cool.
I get it. Yeah, for years I've one of my traditions with my kids is we go and see Green Day every time they tour the UK, and that is exactly the deal there. You know, you get grandfather, grandparents, parents, kids. You know, it's an amazing scene, and I can totally see it. I can totally see it.
It feels great as the person on the other end of that.
Oh yeah,
it's like being multi-generational with your work is fairly amazing experience.
Well, Bob, it must be the ultimate validation, right?
Validation, but even more than that, it's the idea that families are connecting a little bit more because of something I did.
Yeah.
It's kind of heartwarming, I think, is the better word. But yeah, it is validation too, right? You hope your work will live on a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, and yours undoubtedly, well, heartwarming indeed. I mean, to have a family following whatever area of the arts you're in, that's a very special thing, because it often doesn't happen. You know, often it gets tuned into a generation, then the other generation goes on to something else, something that everybody can enjoy together. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And Bob, we're here to talk about 2 beautiful signed editions, signed bookplate editions that you've signed for us of 2 upcoming pieces of work. One is Wave the Drow Book 2, Glacier's Edge, and the other one is the Dao of Drizzt. So I wonder if you could talk me through both of those, maybe starting with Glacier's Edge, or however you want to do it.
I love the way you say glacier.
Oh yeah,
I'm English. I know. I just never heard that like that. It's great. Yeah. Well, when you're writing a trilogy, and this one was a trilogy, it was conceived as a trilogy, but it's really not. When you're doing a trilogy, the middle book is always the slow one, and I don't like that. I don't want people to slow down. I want people to look forward to book 3 and book 2 equally.
Yeah.
So what I do in the middle book and this one, because I set up a couple of conflicts in the first book. One is what's going on down in the Dark Elf City, where the main house has decided Loth is bad. We've been following a tyrant. We need to break away from this craziness. So there's a civil war brewing in the Drow City, and that's kind of the background of a couple of sections of the first book. Bigger sections of the book involve the heroes who are on the surface world finding this new civilization of Drow who were never under the influence of Loth in a polar region, which in itself was a lot of fun to write. But they got themselves in a lot of trouble at the end of the book, and that's the cliffhanger of the first book. So in the second book in this series, I really focused on them and what's going on with them, and with Drizzt bringing him back into the story. And the last 25% of the book is one of the biggest, most intricately and choreographed battle scenes involving many different types of characters, monsters, spellcasters, melee fighters, clerics, everything, even a demigod. And it just turns into this huge, crazy, wild, fun fight that has consequence. And so, and I knew when this one went out that all the books follow the same pattern. Like if you just look at the overview of the customer reviews, they all start out a little lower because the Goodreads people have to be, I really love this book, 4 stars, not 5. That's because they're Goodreads readers. And they have to do that to hold their credibility, I guess. But whatever. But they always start out in the like 4 point nothing or whatever. And then they always go up to like 4.8 stars when you start getting hundreds and thousands of reviews, which is great because that's, and I don't look at the reviews, I look at the cumulative.
Yeah.
Because it tells me, am I still connecting with people? And if I see I'm not, then I'll try and figure out why. But they all follow the same pattern. I knew this one was going to have a faster start because there's not a lot to object to. It's just a lot of fun. This is a fun, wild, crazy romp in a very dangerous place. And everybody gets a showcase. So many characters get to show their stuff in this fight and in the lead up to it, that I just knew this one was going to work. Because I would be writing this book and I'd be walking downstairs and my wife would look at me and say, "What are you giggling about, you idiot?" And I'd be like, "Oh no, you don't understand. You got to read the book." So I don't want it to feel like a book 2. It feels like the conclusion of half of book 1.
Yeah. And
now, of course, I'm writing book 3, which is a really important book in the series because it's the war in Menzoberranzan.
Yeah. And how long does each individual novel, how long does it take you to put them together? How long does it take to write them?
For the Drizzt books, it's shorter because most of the characters are all in place. I'm only introducing 1, 2, or 3 new characters in each book, if that. And I know who they are. I know how they talk. I know their past. So a lot of the times when I'm just telling the logical next story with those characters, it's more a matter of just making sure I'm giving the reader enough background without overburdening the reader. But then the characters will write the story for me while I'm typing because I know them so well. It's like my family's telling me a story at this point. So those books take me maybe 5 months, 4 or 5 months for the first draft. And the first draft goes in very clean. So then it's a month or 2 to clean it up with the other, depending on their schedule. So those are shorter. When I'm doing books in my other worlds, like Demon Wars, I'm doing a new trilogy in Demon Wars. It's many new. The first book is all new characters. I think there are any old characters in it, maybe 1. That's it. Those books take a little longer because now I've got to figure out who these characters are as I go. Because I don't create this huge background for a character, right? I know who he is or she is, and I know what their general appeal is going to be, their general like motivations, and then they surprise me. They surprise me in ways that I never expect. And as I'm going, the character will tell me his or her or their story, essentially. Artemis Entreri at the end of Crystal Shard was put in because I really liked writing the book and I wanted them to give me another one. Because I like that more than working in finance, which I liked quite a bit, but I wanted another book. So I threw Artemis Entreri in there on a whim at the end. And I figured he'd be dead in Streams of Silver. Okay, that was 1989 and 38 books ago. He's still there. Because I liked him, because he told me his story and he became really interesting to me. I think I write books the same way Tracy Hickman does his Killer Breakfast. As long as you entertain me, I'll let you stay alive.
Yeah. How many times do characters for you take on that life of their own where, you have an initial design for them, but
how many characters have I written?
Yeah, right. I'm with you.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
Drizzt was the sidekick to Wolfgar.
Yeah.
How'd that happen? Catti-brie wasn't in the initial draft of the Crystal Shard until my editor, this was back in 1987. Don't get mad at me for being sexist because I admit it freely, because I thought that's the way the world was. But my editor was a woman who's just a few months younger than I am, and she's brilliant and tenacious and ferocious, and I love her to death. And my wife does too. She's wonderful. And Mary said, "Bob, there's no named female hero in this book." And I said, "It's a frontier town." And she's like, "Should I fly out there and slap you?" Or and so my daughter, Caitlin Brielle, was born 15 days before that book had to be turned in.
Yeah.
And hence Catti-brie. And I had no idea who she was. She was a kid to start that book. And it was really, I learned about her as I wrote her. I learned about Entreri as I wrote them. I had no idea. I think I kind of had the archetype of who Bruno was going to be, but I thought he was going to be less mushy when no one was looking. So they always surprise me. Every character in these books surprises me over and over again. That's the joy of it for me. I'm meeting new friends. They're telling me who they are.
I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. And something that your work's very well known for, of course, is its sheer kind of pace and energy. Where do you think that comes from within you, your aptitude for that?
I think there are a couple of reasons. First, I'm a kid of TV, not of reading.
Yeah.
Okay, I was a big reader when I was very young, mostly the Peanuts, the Charles Schulz Peanuts books.
Choice.
I have a whole bunch. You can't see them, but way down the end on that side behind me, way down the end is a collection of first edition Peanuts books from the early 60s. And then school beat the reading out of me, because instead of giving me books to read that were relevant to me, they were giving me either just pieces in these big textbooks that had a paragraph of Faulkner, a paragraph of Hemingway, a paragraph, compare and contrast, and it's like, we have to be blind if you can't contrast those two. But anyway, it just bored me. So I stopped reading, and I started college as a math major. And then I read Professor Tolkien's work, and my life changed. And I read that Peter Beagle introduction from the Ballantine edition, when he said escapism isn't a bad word. And I got to meet Peter Beagle a few years ago, and it was like, you're always afraid when you're meeting your hero. Yeah. He was the most wonderful person. He was doing an event at a local theater, and I was the last one in line. My friend and I, he kept us there for 2 hours, like 1 a.m. before we left, just chatting. And he was just wonderful. And it just, I'm going to cry. He just amazing person. And that introduction that he wrote to that book, reminding me of the escapism of going away with Charlie Brown and his friends, reminding me how much I used to love to read, is what made me a reader again. But I grew up with television. I grew up with Lost in Space and Gilligan's Island and all of that, right? And the Beverly Hillbillies and the Monkees and all of that. So I think that involves pacing. It also involves changing point of view, which I do all the time. And I do it on purpose. In the first book, when I turned in the Crystal Shard, my editor let me have it. He says, "You're changing character point of view all over the place here." I said, "I know. That's what the 5 stars that I'm putting in, they're telling you it's a new character." And he goes, "You can't do that." And I said, "Why can't I do this?" He says, "You'll confuse the reader." I said, "Are you confused?" He says, "No." I said, "Shut up." And I remember when I was in England, back in the early 90s, I was in London with a writer named Tom DeHaven, a wonderful writer who was also a university professor. And we did an interview with BBC. And they asked us why our books were more popular than Tolkien's. And at that time they were, because this was the lull, right? Tolkien was huge through the 60s, 70s, early 80s, and then it just kind of fell off a little bit. And of course, as the cream came back to the top, it rose again. But at that time, we were actually, selling lots of books, and most of the people in the genre had already read the Tolkien books, so they already had them. But Tom made a great point. He said Professor Tolkien was writing to an audience that grew up reading. This was they read. We're writing to an audience that grew up with TV, and that involves pacing. It involves point of view shifts. And the one thing that always frustrated me when I was reading the original books, in fact, I've yelled at Terry Brooks about this many times, and I think he's taken my advice, is they would never describe the fights. I want to see the fights.
Yeah, right on.
I want to see the battles.
Absolutely.
I want to feel it. I want my blood to be pumping. I want to be on the edge of my seat. And you didn't get that. But now I play hockey. And I was a bouncer. That's how I paid my way through college. And I was a boxer in a boxing club. My friends and I started in high school. And I love sports, and I love watching athletes move. The grace, the beauty of watching Serena Williams on the court, or watching my favorite, the one I go to all the time. You'll appreciate this, I hope, is Torval and Dean dancing the bolero.
Of course, yeah.
I watch that over and over and over again. That is perfect art to me.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
I love physical
beauty in motion, isn't it? Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
And so I wanted to get that into the books, and that's how I do my fight scenes.
That is absolutely brilliant, because that propulsivity that you have in your fight scenes, it's something that I don't know if you'd agree with this analogy, but I feel that somehow your fight scenes, I get the same kick out of reading them that I do out of reading like a Jack Kirby fight scene in a comic, in a 60s Marvel comic. You know, that power that he has on the page. I
Yep.
feel that when I'm writing, reading.
Well, good. I'll take that
your action
company any
scenes.
day. Thank you. But yeah, they mean a lot to me because I think it's when you put characters under pressure that you find out who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very well said. Very interesting. Can we talk for a little bit about the Dao of Drizzt? Because
I can talk about that all day.
Yeah,
I just got one. I just did an unveiling. That first time I've unveiled a book, and my wife has filmed it, and I hope she puts it up. I hope it came out all right. I've never done that before, but this one had me shaking. The Dao of Drizzt is, I've been wanting to do it for a long time. People have been asking me for a long time to put all of the Drizzt essays in one place. And it's hard to do it when you're writing a book every year because there's new essays coming every year. And I don't know what I'm going to write in the future because, you know, I think the essays have changed because I've changed as a person. My outlook on life has changed, as with everybody, I would hope. And now's the right time. Now is the right time to do it. It felt right. And I finally convinced Wizards of the Coast. And it was really Harper Voyager jumped at it. They just jumped at it. They said, let's do this. And so they put together this book, and it's quite beautiful. And it's got a wrap cover. It's a half cover that's silver foil. And then you can take that off, and it's got no cover under that, no paper cover. It's the book itself, and it's beautiful. And it's got an introduction by Evan Winter, Rage of Dragons, wonderful book, wonderful guy, who actually helped me. He gave me a couple hours of his time when I wrote Starlight Enclave to show me some perspectives that I might be missing.
Interesting.
And he was just wonderful, generous with his time. And I was so thrilled when he agreed to do the forward for this book. And then it's got the Drizzt essays, broken by book, one after the other. And it's interesting because I was actually at a convention and my phone rang, and it was Victor Bevin, the reader for Audible on the Drizzt books, and his card says the voice of Drizzt, and he is. And he said to me, he goes, you know, I'm doing Dao of Drizzt right now, and it's such a different experience reading all of these one after the other instead of reading them at the beginning of each section of the book. And that's what I wanted, and that's what I knew was going to happen, because when I had to go over and read them all, I was like, wow, what? He was like that then? Wait a minute, what happened to him between these? What happened to me between this book and this book? It was very interesting for me as the writer, and I think it will be. It's the collection a lot of people want, and they did a really beautiful job with it. I'm humbled and thrilled at the way the book came out. But, you know, when I was going to write the Dark Elf trilogy after the Icewind Dale trilogy, they said, tell us where he came from. I was going to do it first person because I'm a huge Roger Zelazny fan, and Amber is like the best first person book I've ever read in the genre. But I realized I like doing battle scenes too much to write first person because I want everybody's opinion. Right. If Drizzt can't be watching Brunner fighting, if he's fighting, because he'd be dead, right?
Of course, of course.
So I compromised and did the essays, and they've become a big part of the books. In fact, the ones that are in the Icewind Dale trilogy, I put in after. They weren't in the original books.
Interesting. I mean, it is a fantastic piece of work, and there's a beautiful signed edition which you've signed for us, available from the links attached to our conversation, along with the signed edition of Glacier's Edge, and before
you can't even say it the way I say it when you try to.
I can't even when I try. That's right. I know it's true. But before we go, Bob, what do you think lies behind the abiding power of Drizzt and his popularity? What is it about him that appeals so much?
Well, I think there are a lot of universal truths in those books, right? Loneliness, feeling of not fitting in. Who doesn't not feel like they don't fit in, right? I mean, even the most popular kid in school feels like he or she doesn't fit in, or they don't fit in. And that's another issue, right? Who doesn't feel like the world is not seeing them?
I think,
and
that's true.
So I think and then you have friendship, true friendship, friends who will jump in, literally in the books, jump in front of an arrow to save you, in front of a speeding arrow to save you. Loyalty. And who doesn't want to have a cat or a dog to talk to? So he's got a lot of things I think in there that are very real. And the other thing I think that's worked a lot is that I care about every character in the books. One thing I really try to do is get in the heads of every character, no matter how minor in the books. And not just on a level of like idiosyncrasy, like he's afraid of spiders or something. Not just on that level, but what really makes these characters tick. So I do believe that a lot of people like characters like Jarlaxle or Artemis Entreri, who was, I used to get fan mail saying Artemis is my favorite character, and then I'd look to make sure that they hadn't addressed it to my home, because that was a little scary, right? But then I began to understand why, because people saw he was on a road of redemption after a terrible start, right? And I care about every character in the book, even the bad guys. And I think that matters. So there's a lot of universal truths in the book. And I think for me, it's like the whole concept of Drizzt is the notion of what it feels like to be walking up to someone before you've even opened your mouth, before you've even come close. They see you, they know where you come from, they know you're the other, and their opinions of you are formed. Because to me, like, the stupidest construct of man is racism.
Well said.
And, that's what those books have been about since 1987 when I started writing them.
Well, but I think that's very powerful and very well said. And long may you continue. I'm looking forward to having another conversation with you 35 years from now, when you've.
It'd be nice if I could get over there again and we could do it in store. I haven't been over there in a long time. I miss it.
Well, mate, you're always welcome at Forbidden Planet. At our flagship store, Forbidden Planet London, or any of the regional stores. When you can make it over, we'd love to host you again, mate.
Oh, you'll know if I'm coming.
Brilliant. And the books are wonderful. They're both available in beautiful signed editions from the links attached to our conversation. And Bob, it has been such a genuine pleasure meeting you. Thanks for finding the time to come and see us today.
Oh, thank you for having me on and for supporting my work over there. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely goes without saying. You take care of yourself, and congratulations on 2 more wonderful books. And I really look forward to seeing what's coming in the 3rd part of the trilogy
next year.
Right on. Take care, mate. All the best.
Take care.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.